Cindy Sage has been involved in EMF issues as an environmental consultant and public policy researcher since 1982. She's provided professional consulting services to cities, counties, various states, and national EMF policy groups on the issue of EMF policy, public perception, and she's our guest tonight in Coast to Coast. Cindy, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, George. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. This situation with ELF and EMF, tell us a little bit about what it all is first.
Well, George, the word EMF is really a broad one. Electromagnetic fields is what it stands for. But contained within that, we have extremely low-frequency, power-frequency fields that relate to all things electrical, power lines, appliances, interior wiring in buildings, and so on. And EMF also includes radio frequency and microwave radiation. And when we talk about RF, we talk about cell phones, cell towers, Wi-Fi, and wireless communications.
So it's all over the place.
Well, it is. In our world, we have exposures today to electromagnetic fields that we didn't evolve with, and biologically are quite foreign to our bodies.
Over, let's say, the last 10 years, how has this increased?
Well, in terms of radio frequency radiation, with the deployment of new wireless technologies, it's exponentially increased. And if you think about the fact that we didn't have cell phones 10 or 15 years ago, we certainly didn't have Wi-Fi, and we didn't have all of the wireless PDA devices that people use today. So not only are we getting exposures that we inflict on ourselves when we, buy and use a cell phone or a cordless phone, we also have secondhand radiation coming in that's involuntary because we have all of these antennas radiating, passing that signal around for people who do use the devices.
I was told not to sleep with a cordless phone by your head. Do you agree with that?
Well, you shouldn't sleep with any electrical device or radio frequency device that's operating near your head. I think it's not a cordless phone so much by your head you'd need to worry about, but if you had an electric clock there that was a couple of feet away or less, you might be in a field that could be in the tens or hundreds of milligauss, and that would be a bad thing.
What are some of the symptoms for people who've been around these too much?
I guess we should probably talk about cell phones and cordless phones when you ask that question, because it's the easiest one to answer.
Okay.
The use of a cell phone and a cordless phone, I'm going to hook onto it in almost every sentence, and let me tell you why. Most people know that cell phones produce a relatively high amount of radio frequency microwave radiation directly into the brain. But what most people don't realize is that a cordless phone is doing the same thing at a lower power. But because people tend to talk hours, they use cell phone or cordless phones without really considering them to be a source of radio frequency, so they do this for hours. And the cumulative dose or the overall dose is probably the same or greater. So the effects are looking to be the same. And the kinds of symptoms that you would see would be interruption of sleep. If you use a cell or cordless phone before you go to sleep, it interferes with the sleep architecture you have, and it reduces the amount of deep sleep that you have. People report, with the use of phones, they report headaches, they report memory impairment, short-term memory loss, difficulty with concentration, dizziness, heating effects that can be uncomfortable, stuffiness across the face, and for some people who use cell phones, they report that they have more trouble with sinusitis, more trouble with infections of the sinus, and so on. So one of the things that's really a marker for this is tinnitus, or this business of ringing in the ears or pressure in the ears. So the list is relatively long, but these are sort of, the top picks.
Maybe texting is better, huh, after all?
Yeah, texting probably is better, for the user because you're holding this away from your body, but, somebody's still getting the secondhand radiation from the cell site passing your message, so.
State of California's got a law that kicks in July where you cannot talk on the phone and drive. You can't have those little things in your ear. Are those safe?
Well, safe is a dicey word to use. What we know is that if you use a wired earpiece, so you're holding that phone away from you, you're getting much less radiation, so that's a good thing. The new wireless devices, the Bluetooth type devices that operate wirelessly are, you're hanging one of those on your ear. And if your method of operation is to leave it on all the time, then again, the dose of radiation that you're getting, non-ionizing radiation, is going to be fairly large. So, yeah, they're better. Are they safe? I doubt it.
What is it like? Is it like the better of two evils, Cindy?
Well, what I'd say is use a wired headset, a wired earpiece, not wireless. And if you can get a hollow tube earpiece, so you don't have the metal cord of the earpiece running all the way up to your head, that's probably best.
Is government trying to help us with this or not?
Well,
there's your answer.
We're right now we have standards that allow about 1,000 microwatts per centimeter squared of exposure for cell phone frequencies, and we're seeing bioeffects down at 1/10 of 1 microwatt per centimeter squared, so they're about 1,000-fold off. And there's been a battle raging with the powers that be that advise government, and there isn't any help in sight on this. So we're one of the reasons that we did the Bioinitiative report was to try to point out to governments around the world that there's a huge disconnect between the standards that we have today that are in place that govern power line exposures, cell phone exposures, all of these EMF exposures, and where, the levels where we're seeing bioeffects occur, and they're at least 1,000 times too high.
Yeah, I've been under a high power line, Cindy, and I've heard it buzz. Is that one of the things you're talking about?
Well, that buzzing is corona effect. You're actually, ionizing air right around that power line from the electric field. But that's not exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about primarily the magnetic field as opposed to the electric field for power lines. Nevertheless, if you're within 1,000 feet of a 500,000-volt transmission line, you're within an elevated magnetic field. And if you're in 2 or 3 milligauss, which isn't very high considering the standard is 904 for power line exposures, the increased risk for childhood leukemia, for example, is in the 2, 3, 4 milligauss range, and the standard is 904. So that's how big the disconnect is.
Tell me about, in detail, the Bioinitiative report.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, a number of us who go to the Bioelectromagnetic Society meetings, and that group is the premier professional research group in the world on this subject. And for a number of years now, this group that should be listening to so many studies now coming out showing bioeffects at such low levels has been accused of ignoring these studies, sweeping them under the rug, and not dealing with this new science. And so a group of us at the BEMS meeting got together and said, look, maybe what we ought to do is to gather together the best experts on the planet in each of the fields that need to contribute, each of the disease point areas and so on, and write a report that highlights the studies we're talking about that are reporting bioeffects and adverse health effects at really low levels in comparison to where the standards are. And in the course of about 9 months, we put together a group like this,
okay,
and put out a report called the Bioinitiative Report. We published it on the Internet so it could get around rapidly to people in government and health agencies. And that report today can be found on the Internet if people want to have a look at it. And thank you very much for posting a note to it, a click to.
Oh, absolutely. I think this is critical, Cindy, that people become aware